Bill, let's talk about what Ryan Day just mentioned about the likelihood of trying to get this thing going by mid-October. That's specific to Ohio State, right? Because it's very clearly motivated by they want to be in the hunt for the national championship.
It's pretty easy to do the math. I think if you look at what the college football playoff has announced thus far, and that's the fact that they're going to announce the final rankings on December 20th. So if you can get a season going in the Big Ten's case by October 17th, which I think is probably the earliest possible date for them at this point, you have 10 Saturdays there. You have 10 weeks before the college football playoff would announce its final rankings. And I think that's enough, even if it's 9 games in a conference title game or it's 8 games in a conference title game and you want to try to work a bye week in there. I think as long as you're playing and you're on the field and you're on a timeline that allows you to get all of your games under the belt before December 20th, then you're in decent shape. And obviously that's what Ryan Day wants.
And obviously there's many steps to get there. And clearly they're going to have to convince some presidents that this is a good idea to play college football. We know there are some developments there from the medical subcommittee to try to get some more information to the presidents and maybe give them a more enlightened decision than maybe they made 5-6 weeks ago when they met. What do we know now about what's realistic here in terms of timing? When a vote could happen again? There's been so much misinformation on that. I know it's frustrating for fans, but what do we really know about how the timing might work here?
Well, they're presenting, the medical subcommittee, like you said, is presenting information to the steering committee. There's a lot of committees to keep track of on Saturday. And then from there, if the steering committee likes that, they can then take that to the university president's board, all 14 university presidents. And in theory, have a vote, a re-vote on the season, whatever you'd like to call it. But it's possible that we're only a day or two away from a re-vote happening. Now, the medical committee could also take that information that they've gathered to the steering committee, and the steering committee can say, well, we don't think this is good enough. We have these questions, answer these, and then come back to us. So it's not guaranteed there's going to be a vote imminently either. But if you talk to people around the Big Ten, a lot has changed. And I think even us on the outside of those conversations can see that they're kind of living in an entirely different landscape now than they were a month ago when they decided to postpone when it comes to daily testing and I think some of the other medical concerns that they've had. So there are things in motion, and I think there is reason for optimism, but I would caution anybody who is sitting here on a Saturday night and thinking to themselves, well, we'll know on Sunday whether or not there's football. It could still take a couple days.
Bill, from an opt-out standpoint, clearly we've had several Big Ten players who are excellent players who've decided that no matter what has happened here, they're going to, in all likelihood, head to the NFL next year and forget about this, not take the risk. This week that came to Ohio State with Wyatt Davis deciding not to play. All-American players, certainly you don't get better with Wyatt Davis not playing. So 2 questions on that. Who could be next from Ohio State, specifically thinking about Justin Fields? And secondly, at that guard position, how do they look from a depth standpoint?
Yeah, Justin Fields is the obvious one when you think about potential opt-outs. Obviously, Shaun Wade. He and Justin are the 2 most likely first-round draft picks. Wyatt has a great chance of being a first-rounder. I think even a guy like Chris Olave has a chance. Now, maybe that chance would have been incumbent on him playing this year and increasing his draft stock. But I think he's got hard decisions to make. Josh Myers is another guy. Thayer Munford is maybe not a first-round pick, but, we see it every year. Ohio State has, if not double-digit draft picks, close to it. They've had 50 draft picks since 2015. There are always going to be between 8 to 12 and sometimes even more guys who have this kind of decision to make, and it becomes more difficult in this scenario where you're not totally sure what the future entails. So I think many of those guys are still going to wait to see what happens with the vote and what ultimately the plan is, but certainly there are more dominoes to fall if the Big Ten doesn't play this fall. And then replacing Wyatt specifically, he was, in my opinion, their best offensive lineman. Like you said, he was an All-American. He had a shot to be a 2-time All-American, first-round pick, one of the better interior offensive linemen in the country. They have recruited well on the interior of the offensive line. You start with fifth-year senior Gavin Cupp, who's been around a while. Enoch Bimahi is a redshirt freshman who's really changed a lot physically. Matthew Jones was a highly touted recruit when he came in. Ryan Jacoby is an Ohio kid who's been in the program a couple years now. They have options, but none of them have started. And none of them I think you can expect to be Wyatt Davis caliber from the start. But they have recruited well enough to make you feel, I think, decent about the depth they have there.
Bill, I read yesterday the comments of the president at Rutgers, and he basically is a firm no in terms of playing this year. And it does make you wonder, if there is a new vote of presidents, how many of them would realistically be swayed and what it would take to get them on board. And what if they do decide to play, but maybe a Rutgers and maybe a couple other schools say, we're not doing it?
It's interesting. And I think it creates a separate discussion when they're having these meetings and they have all these subcommittees gathering their information, because it's not only do we feel okay playing football point blank period. It's school X. If you're not comfortable playing, are you still okay with everybody else playing? And if it's just one school, to use the example of Rutgers, obviously that's one vote, and we're talking about it's a 60% margin they would need to play. It's nine yes votes they would need to play a season. And if Rutgers is one abstaining no, then it doesn't bring the whole thing tumbling down. But if there are other university presidents who are on the fence about whether or not they personally would like their teams to play football, can they get to a place where they can vote to approve the season so that other people can play? Because it's very clear Ohio State definitely wants to play, Iowa wants to play, Nebraska wants to play. James Franklin wants to play. I'm not sure if the powers that be at Penn State want to play, but James Franklin definitely wants to play. So it's still even a little fractured trying to figure that out, which I think speaks to the complexity in all of this. There's only a handful, less than a handful of universities that I think are totally aligned from president on down to football coach and wanting to play this fall. And it's just, can all these people get into a room and get to a place where even if you're okay not playing, can we play, please?